Every quarterback encounters tough competition, but for Steve Young, one matchup left a lasting mark. Now at 63, the Hall of Famer has revealed the opponent who tested him like no other, and surprisingly, it wasn't a defender. This was a rival who could go stride for stride with him, matching every throw and every drive in a game that few remember today. While the NFL spotlight shines brightest on its biggest legends, this unforgettable clash happened long before the fame, in a battle nearly forgotten by history. But before we get into that, let's take it back to where it all started. Steve Young's story begins on October 11th, 1961 in Salt Lake City, Utah. His roots ran deep in the area as his family carried a name with real weight in history. He was a direct descendant of Brigham Young, the man who founded Salt Lake City and served as the second president of the Latter-day Saints Church. That made Steve Brigham Young's great-great-great-grandson. When Steve was in elementary school, the family moved east to Greenwich, Connecticut. That move opened the door for him to step into athletics, and it didn't take long before he began shining on the field. He wasn't just talented in one sport, he excelled in three. At Greenwich High School, he was the captain of the football, basketball, and baseball teams. But Steve's story off the field was more complex. He was a standout student, disciplined, and one of the top kids in his class. Yet behind the achievements, he carried a private struggle with anxiety. As a child, he had severe separation anxiety, something he didn't fully recognize at that moment. His mother, Sherry Young, would walk him to school and sometimes sit with him in the classroom. Invitations to sleepovers were politely declined with excuses about early practices. On the surface, he seemed unstoppable. Captain of teams, straight-A student, never missing school. But inside, he wrestled with fears that most never saw. Those hidden struggles only added to the drive that defined him. That restless energy, that pressure to achieve, became fuel. On the football field, it showed most clearly. As quarterback of the Greenwich Cardinals, he could throw the ball well, but it was his legs that made him special. In an option offense, he became the perfect fit, running with fearless determination. During his senior year alone, he rushed for nearly 2,000 yards and scored 13 touchdowns while throwing for more than 1,200 yards. The recognition followed. All-conference honors 2 years in a row and an all-state selection his final year. As Steve approached the end of high school, plenty of colleges tried to recruit him, but the big-name programs known for airing out the football weren't interested. On film, coaches saw an athlete who could run, but not one who could pass at an elite level. North Carolina's head coach, Dick Crum, wanted him to run the option offense, but Young dreamed of playing in a system that let quarterbacks throw the ball. His father, LeGrande Grit Young, had once led BYU in total offense back in 1959, and Steve wanted to follow in his footsteps. Head coach Lavelle Edwards gave him that chance in Provo, but it was immediately clear he had a steep learning curve. Young wasn't the best passer. In fact, the coaches even considered moving him to defense. Buried deep on the depth chart with no real shot at starting, he nearly quit altogether. Discouraged and ready to go home, he called his father. Grit's response was short but sharp. He could quit, but he couldn't come home. That tough love lit a fire under Steve. Instead of searching for an exit, he doubled down. He practiced obsessively, determined to see how good he could become. Even then, his first season in 1980 was frustrating. 8th-string quarterback, nowhere close to the field. But he studied relentlessly, learning from BYU's star at the time, Jim McMahon, who led the team to an 11-1 record and another Holiday Bowl appearance. By the end of the year, Young had earned MVP honors for the junior varsity squad. Still, doubt lingered. At one point, Edwards called Young into his office. Steve expected praise for his progress, maybe even a chance to travel with the team. Instead, Edwards told him he was moving to defense. The coach valued his speed, but to Steve, it felt like a punishment for wanting to play quarterback. He fought for his position, insisting he could succeed under center. McMahon remained the starter in 1980 and 1981, but when injuries struck, Young finally got a taste of game action. He threw for over 700 yards and rushed for more than 200, helping the Cougars back to the Holiday Bowl. In that game, he and McMahon pulled off a trick play, McMahon pitching to Young, who surprised everyone by throwing a 26-yard strike. It set up an early touchdown in what became a wild 38-36 win over Washington State. When McMahon left for the NFL in 1982 as a first-round pick, the job became Steve Young's. He didn't waste the opportunity. That year, he threw for more than 3,100 yards with 18 touchdowns, rushed for 10 more scores, and even set an NCAA record with 22 straight completions. His efforts earned him first-team All-WAC honors and the conference's Offensive Player of the Year. The team, however, struggled, including a crushing Holiday Bowl loss to Ohio State. But the very next year, everything changed. In 1983, after a narrow loss to Baylor to open the season, BYU didn't lose again. They finished 11-1 with a Holiday Bowl victory over Missouri. Young was the star of that game, scoring touchdowns by passing, rushing, and even catching one on a trick play. That season, he threw for nearly 3,900 yards, 33 touchdowns, and only 10 interceptions, while setting an NCAA record with a 71% completion rate. On the ground, he added 444 rushing yards and 8 more scores. Under his leadership, BYU's offense averaged over 580 yards a game, a record at the time. By the end of 1983, Young was a unanimous All-American, winner of the Davy O'Brien and Sammy Baugh Awards, and runner-up in the Heisman race. In his college career, he threw for over 7,700 yards with 56 touchdowns and added more than 1,000 rushing yards and 18 rushing scores. He left behind 7 WAS records and 13 NCAA records. BYU retired his number 8 jersey, and he was later inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame. In the spring of 1983, professional football welcomed a brand new competitor, the United States Football League, or USFL. Unlike the NFL, this league promised players something few could resist: bigger contracts and more guaranteed money. For many college stars, it was an opportunity they couldn't turn down. In the 1984 USFL draft, the Los Angeles Express made headlines when they selected a left-handed quarterback with the 11th overall pick. Team owner J. William Oldenburg, a billionaire with a flair for dramatic deals, put a staggering offer on the table. It was a 4-year, $40 million contract structured in a way no one had ever seen before. The catch was that most of the money, about $30 million, would be stretched out over 43 years. That offer stood in sharp contrast to what the NFL was prepared to give. If the quarterback had chosen the NFL path, he would have been the number 1 overall pick in the 1984 draft, heading to the Cincinnati Bengals. Their offer was only $3.5 million over 5 years, with just a $1 million signing bonus guaranteed. On top of that, he would have to sit behind veteran quarterback Ken Anderson for at least a season before getting a shot at the starting role. When weighing the options, the choice seemed obvious. The money, the starting role, and the chance to play right away led Steve Young to sign with the Los Angeles Express. His deal included a $4 million signing bonus and modest yearly salaries ranging from $200,000 to $400,000. The true prize was supposed to come years later through an annuity that would have paid him from age 28 until 65. If it had been honored, he would have started receiving million-dollar checks in 2014 that would rise annually until 2027, topping out at over $3 million per payment. But that grand promise never materialized. The annuity was never properly funded, and Young was left to choose between a lump sum of around $900,000 or using it to fund the deal himself. He took the lump sum, calling the annuity little more than false advertising. On the field, Young made an immediate impact. In 1984, his first season with the Express, he threw for 2,361 yards and helped the team to a 10-8 record. The roster was loaded with future NFL talent, including kicker Tony Zendejas, wideout Joe Townsell, and lineman Gary Zimmerman. That season also produced one of the wildest games in football history, a triple overtime playoff battle against the Michigan Panthers that stretched 93 minutes and 33 seconds. Young tied the game late with a 2-point conversion run, and in the third overtime, Mel Gray sealed the victory with a touchdown run, though he broke his arm on the play. The Express made it to the Western Conference Final, but fell short against the Arizona Wranglers. By 1985, cracks began to show in both the team and the league itself. Rumors swirled that Oldenburg wasn't as wealthy as he had claimed. As investigations mounted, the team's finances collapsed, and the league had to step in to cover basic expenses. On the field, the season unraveled. Despite leading Houston 33-13 late in their opener, the Express allowed quarterback Jim Kelly and the Gamblers to stage a furious comeback, eventually losing 34-33. The loss became legendary, remembered as the greatest game no one saw because the league chose to air Doug Flutie's debut instead. From there, things only worsened. Injuries piled up, the team stumbled to a 3-15 record, and at one point, the roster was so thin that Young had to line up at running back. By the end of the season, Young demanded either a new owner or a release. The USFL, already bleeding money, had no good options. Around the same time, New Jersey Generals owner Donald Trump was pushing the league toward a fall schedule in hopes of forcing a merger with the NFL, a plan that ultimately failed. Meanwhile, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had quietly secured Young's NFL rights in a 1984 supplemental draft. The exit from the USFL wasn't simple. Young's lawyer Lee Steinberg argued he was a free agent since the Express had defaulted on their obligations. Commissioner Harry Usher eventually agreed to let Young go, settling for a $1.2 million payout to release him from his contract. The Buccaneers swooped in and signed Young to a 6-year, $5 million deal, tossing in a $1 million signing bonus. Sure, it wasn't nearly as flashy as that jaw-dropping $40 million USFL contract, but it gave him something he really needed: stability and a fresh start. The problem, landing in Tampa Bay didn't exactly make his football life any easier. This was a team that once looked like it was on the rise, almost making the Super Bowl in '79 and sneaking into the playoffs in '82. But by the mid-'80s, the wheels had completely fallen off. From 1983 to 1984, the Bucs scraped together just 8 wins total. In 1985, Young got his first real taste of NFL action. He started 5 games, throwing for 935 yards with 3 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. What stood out, though, was his ability to scramble. He ran for 233 yards and another touchdown, but the Buccaneers struggled badly, finishing with just 2 wins, their second 2-win season in 3 years. The following spring, the franchise found itself in the middle of a disaster involving Auburn's 2-sport star, Bo Jackson. Owner Hugh Culverhouse tried to woo Jackson by flying him to Tampa in 1986, a move that blatantly violated NCAA rules. The punishment cost Jackson his final baseball season at Auburn, and he was furious. He vowed never to sign with Tampa Bay. Instead, he chose professional baseball. Culverhouse stubbornly drafted Jackson anyway, but Jackson proved his point by signing with the Kansas City Royals. That left Young and running back James Wilder Sr. to carry the load. Wilder did what he could, posting 704 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns, while Young showed flashes of his talent. He threw for 2,282 yards with 8 touchdowns and 13 interceptions, while adding 425 rushing yards and 5 more scores on the ground. Still, Tampa Bay wasn't convinced. After the 1986 season, the Buccaneers drafted Vinny Testaverde as their new quarterback and started shopping Young around. To most, it looked like his career was fading before it had even begun. But then came a lifeline. The San Francisco 49ers, fresh off 2 Super Bowl titles, decided to take a chance on him. They already had Joe Montana, the league's premier quarterback, but head coach Bill Walsh saw something worth developing. San Francisco gave up draft picks and money to bring Young in, reuniting him with Mike Holmgren, his old position coach at BYU. Walsh made it clear that Montana was still the franchise leader, but he believed Young's athletic style could fit beautifully into their system. By the start of 1987, Young had climbed to the number 2 spot on the depth chart. That fall, Montana missed 3 games with an injury, and Young made the most of his chance, throwing for 570 yards and 10 touchdowns without a single interception. He even added a rushing score. San Francisco's season ended with a playoff loss to Minnesota, but Young had shown flashes of the talent that Walsh believed in. The 49ers finished the season 10-6 and rode their momentum all the way to Super Bowl 23, edging out the Cincinnati Bengals for their 3rd championship. Young, filling in at times for an injured Montana, threw for 680 yards and 3 touchdowns that season, while adding another on the ground. In 1989, Montana returned to peak form, winning the league MVP. and leading San Francisco to a 55-10 demolition of the Denver Broncos in Super Bowl 24th. Young still played a role, starting 3 games and posting 1,001 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, and 2 rushing scores. In one standout game against New England, he recorded a perfect passer rating, hitting 3 touchdowns on near-flawless passing. The team looked unbeatable heading into 1990. Montana repeated as MVP and carried the 49ers back to the NFC Championship, but the run ended with a painful 15-13 loss to the Giants. Montana left the game after a brutal hit from Leonard Marshall, opening the door for Young to step in. He couldn't pull off the comeback, but the moment foreshadowed change. Montana's injuries from that game lingered, forcing him to miss the entire 1991 season. This was supposed to be Young's time, but instead he found himself battling more than just defenses. His nerves before games were overwhelming, to the point where sleepless nights became routine. By the week of an October matchup with Atlanta, his anxiety had reached breaking point. He even skipped practice, pretending he had the flu. By game day, he was running on empty. Despite that, Young had one of his most remarkable performances, throwing for 348 yards and 2 touchdowns, while rushing for another 68 yards and 2 more scores. The 49ers still lost 39-34, but for Young, the game marked a personal turning point. Afterward, he finally opened up to the team doctor about his struggles, who directed him to a child psychologist. The diagnosis stunned him, severe childhood separation anxiety, but for the first time, he had a name for what he had been battling his entire career. Even with the setbacks, Young's 1991 season was a success statistically. He threw for 2,517 yards, 17 touchdowns, and only 8 interceptions, while adding over 400 rushing yards and 4 rushing scores. He even led the NFL in passer rating with a mark of 101.8, but San Francisco still missed the playoffs at 10-6. And his future as Montana's successor remained clouded. By the time the 1992 season kicked off, the 49ers were staring at a crossroads. Joe Montana was on the mend from a serious elbow injury, while Steve Young had just put together a solid run as the starter. The front office even toyed with the idea of shipping Young to the Raiders, but in the end, they decided to keep him right where he was, in San Francisco. When the season kicked off, Montana wasn't quite ready. The 49ers held on to all 3 quarterbacks, Montana, Young, and Steve Bono. Young opened as the starter, but a concussion in Week 1 forced Bono into action, and he delivered a victory. By Week 2, Young was cleared, and head coach George Seifert made the bold call to stick with him. That decision set the tone for one of the greatest stretches of Young's career. From that point forward, Young caught fire. Even though the team lost in Week 2, he was nearly unstoppable for the rest of the season, guiding the 49ers to 13 wins in their final 14 games. His numbers were staggering: 3,465 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, and only 7 interceptions, along with a career-best 537 rushing yards and 4 rushing scores. He led the league in touchdowns, completion percentage at 66.7%, interception percentage at just 1.7%, and passer rating at 107.0. Awards poured in: NFL MVP, the Burt Bell Award, Offensive Player of the Year, UPI NFC Offensive Player of the Year, First Team All-Pro, and his first Pro Bowl selection. The 49ers went 14-2, beat Washington in the divisional round, but fell to the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC Championship. By the end of 1992, Young had proven himself as an MVP. But the quarterback controversy wasn't over. Montana was finally healthy and eager to reclaim his starting role in 1993. Many players in the locker room felt Young had earned the job, yet management leaned toward Montana. At Montana's request, the 49ers traded him to the Kansas City Chiefs, and the team officially became Young's. Taking over full-time was no smooth transition. Fans in San Francisco still idolized Montana, and many of them booed Young. On top of that, Young wrestled with crippling anxiety off the field, later admitting that while he thrived in competition during the day, nights were a constant battle. The 1993 season began with frustration when Young injured his throwing thumb. He struggled, tossing 8 interceptions in the first 6 games as the 49ers stumbled to 3-3. But once his thumb healed, he caught his stride again. The team closed the season 7-3, finishing 10-6 overall. For the first time, Young eclipsed 4,000 passing yards, throwing 29 touchdowns and posting a 101.5 passer rating. He also added over 400 rushing yards for the third straight year, earned first-team All-Pro honors, and returned to the Pro Bowl. But the Cowboys once again crushed San Francisco's Super Bowl hopes, beating them 38-21 in the NFC Championship. The repeated failures against Dallas lit a fire under the 49ers management. They knew the roster needed reinforcements to take down the Cowboys. So in 1994, the team went on a historic free agency spree. They added cornerback Deion Sanders, former Cowboys linebacker Ken Norton Jr., Chargers linebacker Gary Plummer, Hall of Fame pass rusher Richard Dent, sack specialist Tim Harris, veteran Ricky Jackson, and two-time Super Bowl champ Charles Mann. The roster was loaded with talent and experience. That fall, one game loomed larger than the rest. On September 11, 1994, the 49ers traveled to Kansas City for a matchup with Montana's Chiefs. It wasn't a playoff game, but the anticipation was so immense it felt like one. Montana, the legend of San Francisco, faced off against Young, the man who had replaced him. The Chiefs won 24-17, with Montana putting on a calm, efficient performance. Young, despite throwing for more yards, was plagued by turnovers and sacks. In the final minutes, the 49ers had a chance to tie, but a John Taylor fumble sealed the defeat. For Young, it was another reminder that the shadow of Montana was never far away. Yet 1994 would be Young's ultimate redemption. That season, he threw for 3,969 yards and a career-high 35 touchdowns, while adding 7 rushing scores. His 70.3% completion rate and 112.8 passer rating broke Montana's records. He collected another MVP award, another Burt Bell Award, and earned his third Pro Bowl trip. Most importantly, he and the 49ers finally beat the Cowboys in the NFC Championship, 38-28, breaking the 2-year curse. In Super Bowl 29, Young delivered the performance of his life. He shredded the San Diego Chargers for 325 yards and a Super Bowl record 6 touchdown passes, surpassing Montana's mark of 5. The 49ers won 49-26, and Young was named Super Bowl MVP. With the trophy in hand, he had finally stepped out of Montana's shadow. But just as San Francisco conquered one rival, another rose in their path. Beginning in 1995, Brett Favre's Green Bay Packers eliminated the 49ers from the playoffs 3 straight years, including the 1997 NFC Championship. Through those seasons, Young's play remained elite. He led the league in completion percentage from 1995 to 1997, topped passer rating in 1996 and 1997, and made the Pro Bowl each year. Then came 1998, perhaps his greatest season. Young threw for a career-high 4,170 yards, led the league with 36 touchdown passes, and ran for 454 yards with 6 rushing scores. He earned yet another Pro Bowl nod and second-team All-Pro honors. That postseason, the 49ers finally defeated Green Bay in a thrilling wild-card matchup capped by Young's last-second strike to Terrell Owens for the game-winning touchdown. But the joy was short-lived. A week later, the season ended in heartbreak with a narrow 20-18 loss to the Atlanta Falcons. The 1999 season had barely begun when disaster struck. In a game against the Cardinals, Aeneas Williams delivered a crushing hit that knocked Steve Young out cold. The diagnosis came quickly. Another concussion, his 4th in just 3 years. The timing couldn't have been worse. Only a week earlier, against the Saints, Young had taken such a brutal beating that he later admitted he couldn't even remember throwing what turned out to be the game-winning touchdown. For the first time in his career, Young publicly acknowledged fear. At a press conference that night, he admitted he was worried about the long-term toll repeated head injuries might take on his life. His confession carried weight. It wasn't just about missing games anymore. It was about his future. Young spent the rest of the year sidelined, waiting for medical clearance that never came. Without him, the 49ers collapsed, making it easier for him to accept sitting out instead of feeling pressure to push through for a playoff run. Behind the scenes, Bill Walsh was already steering the franchise in a new direction. Walsh, who had once rebuilt a 2-14 team into a Super Bowl powerhouse, now seemed less interested in squeezing out another season from an injured veteran than in reshaping the future. When it became clear Young would never again wear the 49ers uniform, speculation turned to Denver, where former San Francisco coordinator Mike Shanahan needed a quarterback. But if Young couldn't get cleared to play in San Francisco, how could the Broncos justify the risk? The only real option left was retirement. Young believed he was still at the top of his game, but his body told another story. The speed and elusiveness that once made him untouchable had faded. He wasn't the same scrambling quarterback who had redefined the position, setting an NFL record with 43 rushing touchdowns. 3 years earlier, the team had asked him to stay in the pocket to protect himself, but Young resisted, insisting he play his style. With Garrison Hurst sidelined after offseason surgery, defenses zeroed in on him. He didn't even make it through 3 full games in 1999. Still, denial just wasn't in Young's DNA. Sure, he could have pulled a power move, forced the 49ers to fail him on a physical, and then chased one last run somewhere else, just like Joe Montana once did, but that wasn't Young's style. Instead, he decided to step away on his own terms, still a 49-year legacy intact. And yet, through all the highs of his career, there was always that one person who made things harder than they had to be. Before Jim Kelly and Steve Young carved out an NFL legacy, they met in the USFL. It was 1985, opening day, with Kelly's Houston Gamblers matched against Young's Los Angeles Express inside the cavernous Los Angeles Coliseum. The stadium could hold over 90,000 people, but that day it was nearly empty. Fans at home missed out as well. The league chose to broadcast Doug Flutie's debut instead. With no crowd energy and no cameras, the atmosphere was flat. Reporters later recalled how quiet it was, quiet enough to hear Young call plays from the huddle. For 3 quarters, the game seemed forgettable. The Express built a commanding 33-13 lead, and with under 10 minutes left, it looked over. Then came the spark. Kelly caught fire, shredding Los Angeles with 3 late touchdown passes. In less than 10 minutes, he turned a blowout into a 34-33 Gamblers victory. By the end, Kelly had piled up 574 passing yards, one of the most remarkable performances of his career. The final strike went to wide receiver Ricky Sanders, his 3rd touchdown catch of the afternoon. Kelly completed 35 of 54 passes, walking off the field with the kind of adrenaline rush athletes never forget. Years later, he still called it the best he had ever felt after a game. Sports Illustrated gave the contest a fitting nickname, the greatest game no one saw. And in many ways, that's exactly what it was. 2 future Hall of Famers dueling in front of empty stands and absent cameras, producing a classic that history almost forgot.